feel like a kid today. I think I just have a lot of people to thank for today. Dana, thank you very much. I felt quite rejuvenated after our session today, dancing around like a little fairy. Billa, thank you for my instructions today, which helped me out a lot. I was quite intrigued by my mandala and how into it I got and what it gave me in return. Carol, thank you for working with Miro. I'm sure it'll make my day tomorrow a much more pleasant one with him. I couldn't believe when I looked over at him and his eyes were closed and you were just, it was magical. It was quite nice. Thank you, Liz, for somehow getting me here and having this property and doing everything that you've done. Thank you, Dave, for hot shower. And everyone for just being who they are. It's an incredible group and just such dynamics among everyone. And, you know, I was saying to, I think it was Jane today when we were walking down the road, that it's incredible that we have been living together for however many days and there isn't anyone, from my opinion, that's getting on anyone's nerves, which doesn't happen very often. I mean, everyone is just so open, I think, is why. And maybe just everyone is just so in tune to themselves and happy in their own skin that they don't need to give anyone else any other negativity, which is so unique. And I thank everyone for that.
But I remember what that felt like, that first shower, and it wasn't until I hit the point of feeling better, which was that very next morning, you know, that sort of came at the other end of broken open, the other end of feeling like you know, were at the bottom of where you could go, right? And I watched you guys struggle through some of the exact same things. And my human nature was to go, which I didn't. I actually had to make a conscious effort not to jump in and try and play the savior, like, come on, darling, come take a shower. You can, you know. And it's just, it's so fun to see what happens when we really start feeling gratitude for such simple things. And the moment I started to notice what the lesson was in my grief and in my own head, it was to find gratitude, literally, in things like taking a shower, warm water, you know? Like, who stops to think about it? If anything, we rush through like a bat out of hell, trying to get out of the house to work and go here and go there. And that was just one of the things that really resonated for me. And I found myself thinking about that today when I was making my mandala. So it was just absolutely divine to come back and see the girls dancing around and acting like it was Christmas because they had hot water dropping on their head. Because I was just, it was about that. It was about thinking about just the gratitude. And they're like these big, huge things to be grateful for, and yet I just get this overwhelming sense of calm, relaxed, complacent gratitude for, you know, even like the simplest things.
I had a wonderful day today about looking at the footage, and everybody's a star. It's incredibly beautiful. Wow. Frank's footage is, the message is coming across so clearly.
And the other amazing thing that happened today was I had a fabulous conversation with Gina and Connie. A very interesting conversation about really far out stuff. And we laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. And it was so healthy and so wonderful and so special. So thank you, you two. It was great.
You can elevate anything, Jen, and make it elegant. Even that covers.
Well, I'm contemplating the meditation that I'm going to be reading to you tonight, and I was remembering the results of when Liz and I and about 5 other women were in a group together about 11 or 12 years ago, I guess it is. Or how long have you been here? 11, 10 years?
Been here 10.
10, so 11 and 12, because we were about 2 years with that, weren't we? And you can see the results of that meditation right here. And Liz was so excited when, we were doing Sonia Choquette's book, Your Heart's Desire. And so I just feel so fortunate because I was a witness to all of that unfolded. And to be here, I just feel so, it's just such a gift. And I was starting to go over my history of what came to fruition for me through this lovely book. And I started taking inventory, and I thought of some really magical things that happened that I'd forgotten about.
One with the Herd was the first book I read in March. And I had purchased all 4 books before I had decided to come here, before I even knew about workshop. But I read these 3 poems, and I made a reflection on the poem. And if you could read your poem, I'll read my reflection.
So this was actually written, interestingly enough, when I was living in the wall tent and suffering, cold water or no water, and walking the land every day with my animals. And, I'd moved from this big house, with all these conveniences, into this wall tent, and it wasn't nearly as nice as what Connie's in, because I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor and hung my clothes on nails, and it was really, really rustic. But I was there with my dogs, my cat, 1 cat, and 3 dogs. And Kevin left most of the time. He was too busy running back and forth to Gibson's to try and make it all work. So I was totally alone, and so I was writing in my journal as all these things came up, and aloneness came up, and surrender came up, and all these things that you would expect when you're dealing with a major life change. So this is surrender. It's not what you expected, is it? When you surrender to the current, life takes a direction of its own. Our life becomes a creation, a joy, and a free flow. Each day a new beginning, a new growing and becoming. You are traveling quickly now. Don't look back, and most of all, don't fear the appearance. You have asked me to be with you. And this was channeled like a conversation with God, okay? So this is like God talking to me. You have asked me to be with you, and I am there. You will no longer see the illusions if you truly know that. It's all one, you see. Joy and sorrow depend only on your vantage point. This is your creation. Don't be afraid to be who you are. When the time is right, it will all come together, and you will see the whole perspective, and you will see how much I love you. For now, be content. That's surrender.
So mine was surrender and be content. Thanks be to God. Finally I can surrender all with my whole and open heart, never to own a broken heart again. Thanks be to Jesus and his nail-scarred hands. And the next one, 96.
96 in here for me.
For you.
Okay. Naked into truth.
No,
Oh, for joy.
just a second. 96. For joy.
Page
Read
96,
for joy first.
Okay, this was a poem that I wrote when I was just watching the horses. Because I would just go out in the land and watch them and just watch how amazing they were. And so this is called For Joy. For joy I watch them buck and dive and roll, loving the earth and sky. At home in the meadow, belly deep in the lake, splashing and drinking. Their bed a pillow of soft cotton grass. One with the wind they wander wild and free, yet still they let me enter their sacred space, and giving me their trust, carry me to their world, a privileged passenger for joy.
For joy and sorrow go hand in hand, step in step, hoof in hoof, in hoof in hoof. And then I reflected on what I wrote, and the sorrow was giving up of my negative sorrows. For joy, received God's graces with joy. For the hands, with open hands and heart, I received. And then for step in step, Billa's ceremonial stomp into the ground with our feet. And the hoof and hoof and hoof and hoof, of course, is our herd.
We are born naked, vulnerable, innocent, and completely safe. And we spend the rest of our days protecting ourselves. From what? Fear of the unknown? We knew nothing before we got here, and we made it to birth okay. I must challenge any fear or doubt. Run naked into truth. No small mission. So what is the remaining hurdle? The last bit of ego, that last bit of doubt in a concept I fully know to be true. That lapse into forgetfulness, the human condition. Looking for love, the first book of my life, and naked into truth, the second. To translate the gift of finding love in all life into the workable solutions of running naked into truth. Now that I've found God, love, everywhere, the test is to live by my beliefs, to translate those into form, to create a work of art with every fiber of my being. Thou shalt know them by the fruit they bear. Bear witness to me.
And then run naked into my truth, bearing my deepest soul's secrets and shames. Get rid of the last bit of ego, hurt, anger, and pain. The test is to live by my beliefs, now that God has access to all of me. My deepest agonies have been replaced with God's unconditional love and grace. Jesus took the arrowhead out of my aching, throbbing, torn heart. The wrenching, twisting pain that I was hanging on to for all those years. Holy Spirit, go to work. Now fill me till my heart runs over with your divine enlightenment. And I signed it in love and light. And I wrote this March 24th, 2009. That's all I want to say right now.
Thank you for getting it. so rewarding, so amazing.
So as you know, last night I went up to the Four Directions tent via the throat chakra tent. Stood around there calling for a while, but anyway, the Four Directions just really resonates with me. I just love it up there. I'm going to build my house up there. Anyway, I found the tent fine, and I'd taken some sage up for me, so I sort of put all my gear into the tent, and then I'm like, right, I'm going to do this ritual. It was really windy up there. The wind was coming up through up from the lake, up the valley, and like blowing right into the door of the tent. But the moon was just sort of coming up over the hills on the other side, and it was like, wow. Anyway, so I did my ritual with the sage that I'd taken up there all around the edge of the Four Directions, and I'd left a path for the ancestors to come, or, to join me there. And I kind of would have liked to have been able to sit outside and, watch the moon and that, but it was rather chilly. But in the tent it was really cool. But I lay in there, and I practiced some expansion technique, which I've, Billa kind of got me onto. And I envisioned myself down here with you guys in the Spirit Lodge. So that was really neat. And I had all sorts of visions and things like that. And I had a sensation while I was there that the lower half of my body, it was like stuff, I don't know if stuff was just draining out, or just the lower half of my body was just being like sucked down into the land there, like really grounding me in that. But the top half of me was like floating up here in the ether somewhere. And that was like really amazing. It was really cool. And I didn't sleep much because the wind was blowing on the tent, and the tent was flapping a bit, and I kept thinking, oh, it's the horses, it's the horses. But it wasn't the horses, it was just the wind. And then it rained, and that was neat, lying in the tent. And the tent was really cozy, and it's all nice and warm and toasty. And I, put some water on the land, of course, to keep it pure and honest and all the rest of it. And anyway, I woke up early in the morning. It was about 5 o'clock, I think, and I looked out, and it was still pretty windy and rainy and that, but just such a neat view, sort of, because the way the tent's set up, you're just looking straight down onto the lake, just amazing. And I journaled there for a bit, and then kind of dozed off back to sleep, and then woke up, and I'm like, oh no, it's time to leave. I better start packing up and heading back for breakfast or something. And I'm like, put this minute thought out there. I'm not really ready to go back yet. But, I'm like, oh, well, I better, So I pack everything up and roll everything up. And again, because I'd taken some rocks up with me as well, which last night I couldn't find, but I found them in the morning, you see. So I'm like, oh, great. And there were 5 rocks. So I put one at each of the 4 the 4 directions, and put the other one for the ancestors. And while I'm putting this last one down, I'm thinking about the Trevi Fountain in Italy. And I don't know if any of you have ever been there, but when you go there, you put coins into the fountain, and if you put 3 coins into the fountain, then you're going to come back to Italy. And I'm like, I wonder how many stones I have to put down to come back to the, to the 4 directions, Anyway, so that's cool. So I wandered down. I had my map there, and I wandered down, gave gratitude and that to the, to the 4 directions, and wandered down to the crystal skull, and gave gratitude there, and I'm like, right, okay, so I know exactly where I'm going. Well, so I wandered off, and I just wandered off. I'm like, where am I? Oh, because I went down, I saw the solar plexus chakra there, and I knew the horses had been there because there was fresh horse poop there. And I'm like, no, I don't want to go through that chakra, so I'm like, I'm heading off. And I'm like, I come to this fence, and I'm like, where am I? I just wandered off. And I'm like, so I'm thinking, oh, okay. So, and I'm like, and there were horses over the other side of the fence.
What?
Yeah, and because I thought it was Epona because it looked like a chestnut. And I'm like, okay.
Horses over any of the sides of the fence? Well, there's no horses on Bill's yard.
Was it a wood fence or a barbed wire?
It was a barbed wire. And there were all the trigs there.
There's no horses on Bill's, and there's
well,
no horses on Frolic.
There were
How
definitely,
did you see horses?
well,
Maybe there are horses on Frolic, what do we know?
anyway, I'm like, no, I can't. I'm like, okay, if that's Epona or whoever, how did they get over the fence? And I'm like, no, I can't go over the fence because that's not what you do, So I'm like, oh, okay. So I wandered back, and I'm like, I'm not worried or anything. It's like, okay, that's cool, just cruising along. And then, because of course when I'd left the Four Directions tent, I'm like, I'm going to come back here. And it's like, the echo comes back. Yeah, we know you are, kind of thing. Yeah, we'll see you back here. So I'm sort of wandering around, and I'm thinking, oh, God, where am I, And then I look up and I see this spirit tent. And I'm like, spirit tent. And it was the throat chakra spirit tent. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then I looked along a bit, and it's like, there's the Four Directions tent. I'm like, well, that's really cool. But I was the other side of them. I wasn't, where the crystal skull's there, and then there's the spirit, one of the Four Directions. I was over here. And I'm like, how did that happen? And it was like, I'm thinking, yeah, spirit's laughing away here. Well, you didn't want to go back yet. And yeah, you did. Because to get back to where I could follow my map properly, I needed to go back to the Four Directions. And it's like, well, you did want to go back here. I was like, and then anyway, I'm walking back up to the Four Directions from the other direction. From the other end of the land, and I found that I saw this really neat rock lying there, and it's like a really neat rock, and I'm like, wow, and it weighs, it's really, really heavy, and I'm like, oh, I've got to take that back.
That's thick core though.
It's what? Sorry. It's like it's perfectly round on, it was lying in the land like that. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. So I picked it up, and anyway, it was like, well, I've got to bring that back. So that's that. Okay. And okay, so I get back to the Four Directions tent, and I'm like, great to see you again, thank you. And I'm like having a little giggle with spirit because, well, be careful what you wish for. So I did the circle again and said thank you, I'm really grateful, and gave gratitude. And then went back down to the crystal skull again. And then it's like, okay, right. And I just basically walked straight home. And I'm like, well, where was I before? I couldn't believe how easy it was the second time. I'm like, what? It was like I was completely zoned.
Today when I was going towards my mandala, I saw a marmot. And I did what this journey has told me to do and followed the marmot. Where normally I would go, that's nice, and keep going. So I followed him to a pile of rocks, and he went down into the rocks. And I looked down and I saw a crevice. And the day that we walked through the crevice, it seems like years ago, nothing happened to me. I guess I was too tired. I think I was just not in the journey like I am now. So I thought, walk through the crevice. Why not? That's what I meant to do, for sure. So I stepped in, and instantly, the crevice is only this long, this wide, only up to my knees. Look it up. So I walked in, and instantly, there I was, riding my very first pony bareback through the meadow. And I laughed. I went, yeah, and kept going to my mandala, which was a bit of an experience in itself. I think I'll just say, instead of talking about my mandala tonight, that I really didn't expect to be on a journey when I came. I expected to be an observer and sit and, participate, but figure out how to write an article. And I had no idea I would be where I am today. Whew.
Everything's been wonderful here. Every one of us is special, already's gotten their roots, very fulfilled life, has probably achieved more goals than all our neighbors or most of our friends. But we all knew there was still something lacking and still something there. And Liz and Kevin, they built this land and it was waiting for us. And we are fortunate to just be here right now and enjoy it. We didn't have to think about solar and earth and how will this stand up and a road here and a toilet there. We can just come and enjoy it, and it's absolutely fabulous. And what Billa and Donna taught us is just out of this world. They really helped me so much, and I will go home. And not with hope, but with knowledge that I will master the rest of my life in a much better way.
And I'm just sitting here and I'm thinking about how we're sitting in this womb of Grandmother Earth, and the seeds that are planted in this womb are like seeds that get planted in the womb of a woman, and the seeds grow and come to fruition and birth. And so all the things that we're learning here for us are going to go out into the world and be planted as seeds for other people. And one thing that's so constant in our world is change. And we can affect change by how we think and the seeds that we plant inside. And God just takes care of the rest once we plant that seed, right? And I was thinking about Jane and how her mandala had changed. And it was just so profound, because that's a perfect example of how we don't have control of what takes off after we plant the seed, but we do have control of when we plant it. And it reminded me of, I have these trees on our property that are the trees where we did the ceremony when I manifested my horses, I don't know, 8 years ago or however long it was. And it's a very special spot for me, and I go there and I pray, and I while Jane was telling about the change in her mandala, I was remembering that I planted this beautiful crystal in the center of these old wonderful trees that are leaning right on Flume Creek that runs through the border of our property in Roberts Creek. And I was so excited because I planted this crystal thinking, okay, I'm going to charge it in amongst my favorite trees, well, a patch of my favorite trees. I have so many. And then I'll have this fabulous crystal that will be charged with this energy. And the next time that I came through there, Grandmother Earth just went, because I could not find it. It was just gone. And, you know, this is years ago, and every time I come through my little trail, which is very often, I go in there and I'm in awe that it just totally disappeared into thin air. Because I didn't bury it deep. I just put it under the ground because I knew I was coming back to get it. And it's just like disappeared. It's gone. So, I mean, be careful what you wish for. Be mindful of your power and the power that your truth can send out into the ethers just by your thoughts and the things that you hear yourself say. And the power, you know, that we have to change the world is huge. And here we are, we're sitting in the womb. You know, look at what you guys created. This isn't just some structure. It's buried in Grandmother Earth here, so carefully planned. And it was done very mindful for all of the people that come here to plant seeds for their new life.